Hello, this is Photography Gamer, welcome back to the channel. In today's video I'll be looking at the 10 reasons why PES failed. For those who don't know, PES or Pro Evolution Soccer is no more. Konami have announced the PES brand is being discontinued, with a new free-to-play game called eFootball due to launch in the latter half of 2021. Okay, let's get into it. Number 1. The lack of official licenses. For as long as I can remember, PES was plagued by the lack of official licensing. In the end, money talks, and EA stumped up the cash to secure the vast majority of licenses for the biggest leagues in the world for its FIFA franchise. Konami went down a different path. Instead, they relied on the hard work and diligence of the stellar modding community to fill in the gaps. But this lack of initial and continual investment took its toll in the long run. Like any competitive business, it's not always the best product that wins, but the one that gets in early and makes the right connections with the key partners and stakeholders. In my opinion, this was Konami's biggest mistake, as they may have saved money in the short term, but in the long run, their business model paid the price for their lack of initial investment. This resulted in the global football community, from players, clubs, fans, or media outlets, forming a very strong bond with FIFA, making each release a global event. In the end, the lack of a complete official licensing structure left PES feeling a bit like an unfinished and unprofessional product when compared to the FIFA game, and in terms of trying to appeal to new customers. Number 2. Outdated presentation. Back in the day, computer games weren't the slickest productions with unimaginative presentation. But as the gaming industry gained popularity, so did the demand for a more polished, professional and aesthetically pleasing product. For many years, it seemed as though Konami were stuck in the dark ages, relying on a tired, bland and outdated presentation format. At the same time, other sports franchises were evolving into much slicker and visually pleasing affairs. Yes, in the last couple of years, PES has improved in that area to a degree, but it is a little bit too little, too late, which is very similar to most of the points regarding the demise of PES. Number 3. No mods for Xbox players. As I said earlier, the important thing for any franchise is continual improvement and growth. So any fan base that you can tap into to expand your reach is vital to sustain the game's future. Modding forms a massive part of why PES lasted so long, with diligent modders recreating real-life kits to compensate for PES being unlicensed. I've been part of that community, and it's full of so many talented artists who work really hard to bring enjoyment to the other players. But Konami's over-reliance on them wasn't able to save the game when it came to the Xbox fanbase. Sadly, Xbox doesn't allow external files to be imported into PES, leaving a basic editor akin to Microsoft Paint for players to use. It basically killed the game on Xbox, and I'm sure Konami could have worked out a deal with them to allow some sort of modding. But again, the lack of licensing came back to haunt them here. Number 4. Terrible standards of refereeing. So now we're getting into the day-to-day issues such as gameplay. One thing PES has tried to be is a simulation of the beautiful game in recent years. But in regard to the referees, they may have gone a step too far. In the recent PES games, it's become quite tiresome in terms of gameplay, with really overzealous referees making every game a very stop-start affair. The fluidity and fast-paced nature of football has been compromised. End-to-end classics are a thing of the past, and it's just really disappointing. All due to the game being filled with referees who give fouls for almost anything. Any contact, touch, tactical fouls everywhere, some decisions that are ridiculously harsh. It really has just ruined the game a little bit in recent years, and Konami seemed to have lost touch with its roots. Back in the day, PES was a lot more fun. Matches were exciting, fast and fluid affairs with end-to-end gameplay. Now PES feels a little bit more like watching an NFL match with so many stoppages, it's ridiculous. And in the end, that really does ultimately limit the enjoyment of the game, and it's one area where realism has compromised the actual gameplay enjoyment. Number 5. The same dry commentary team. Commentary in sports games has evolved over the years. I have to reference the US sports games here, like NBA, NFL, or even the UFC. These games have got a fluid commentary that seamlessly blends with the action, often referencing small details about what's going on screen. Sadly, PES falls way short in this regard. Now, this is not a direct critique of the commentators themselves, it's the team behind the scripting of the audio. They clearly don't do enough work, the lines of dialogue are over repeated, lacking any nuance, and on the whole, it just gets tiring very quickly. Konami need to recruit someone from the NBA or NFL franchises and totally overhaul the structure of the commentary. Make it relevant, make it insightful, instead of the tired and repetitive things we've got at the moment. But again, it sums up the franchise as a whole. They're over-reliant on the past methods, lacking innovation, lacking foresight, lacking the ability to move with the times. Number 6. Never maximising the Master League's potential. Now, I've been playing PES for years. I was playing it when it was called Winning 11 and you had to import it from Japan. In that time, the one mode that has set PES apart was Master League. But again, Konami never really expanded that mode or developed it year on year to turn it into something the footballing world would take notice of. One aspect of it that sums up Konami's mindset again is the youth player system. In Master League, when a player retires, they just get reused as a 16-year-old youth player. Imagine Neymar retired and then he suddenly appeared in another team as a teenager. It was a complete immersion breaker and shows that Konami were fundamentally quite lazy with PES as a franchise. Again, they relied on the loyal fanbase and the modders to salvage their half-hearted efforts. And even in the most recent version, the youth player problem still persisted, which is very, typical and indicative of Konami and the flaws in their development structure. Number 7. The standard of goalkeeping. Another gameplay issue has been goalkeepers for as long as I can remember. They never get the balance right. Keepers were either useless or like Superman. It is amazing in all these years of PES games that they never got it right, but you can also apply that principle to the game as a whole. Every year a new game came out, some things were better, some things were worse. But gameplay wise, surely they should have nailed it down by now. Like the NBA games, gameplay wise they're pretty much spot on in terms of replicating the sport. Once you nail down the feel of the sport, then you can move on to other things like, presentation and the aesthetics. But once more, Konami failed in all these years of development to nail down a truly winning formula. Number 8. Difficulty balancing. The difficulty of PES is one of the biggest issues with the most recent installments. For all the different settings available, they never get one that feels like real football. Even higher ones were so easy you'd just walk to the title assuming you had any experience with PES. But turn it up to the max difficulty and the games weren't even like football at all. It was like playing a team of Cyborg, Ronaldo and Messi's. In the early days I'd say they managed this feature better. But in the last 4 or 5 years they seem to have flip-flopped on difficulty all over the place and it never really feels like a right balance. Number 9. Selling a half-finished game at full price. For most consumers this was a deal breaker. When you pay full price for a product you expect it to be finished. Selling a game with unfinished or unlicensed teams was never going to be acceptable. No other franchise would have got away with it for this long. Imagine buying God of War, then finding out Kratos was replaced with some guy called Chris because they couldn't be bothered to pay for the license in the first instance and let someone else take it. That's essentially what Konami did. Like I said earlier, they've tried to continue doing PES on the cheap. If they'd have invested in the series earlier, like EA did, they wouldn't be in a situation where they're having to kill off the PES brand and completely revamp it. Number 10. It wasn't FIFA. In the end, this is the real reason that PES failed. It just couldn't compete with FIFA. Whether you like FIFA or not, they won the war. They got the licenses, they tapped into real life football and made the FIFA game synonymous with official teams and official players. Like when you see real footballers tweeting about their FIFA ratings or stuff about the game, you know that you've tapped into the consciousness of the football world. Sadly, PES never had that cultural appeal. Due to its money-saving choices in regard to licensing, it was always a niche game, albeit one with a very loyal fanbase and amazing modding community. Gameplay-wise, PES in recent years attempted to be more like a simulation than like the fun arcade origins. For me, that's another choice that limited its potential growth, as it didn't have the crossover appeal to take away some of the FIFA fanbase. So Konami has chosen to kill off PES and reboot it via the eFootball brand. Will it work? Well, no one knows for sure, but it does seem a bit like the last throw of the dice for Konami in regard to this football franchise. Whether it succeeds will depend on a few things, like if they embrace the modding community, give the fans what they want, and just make the game better by addressing a lot of key flaws in their product. Ultimately, it is a sad day for PES fans like me, but fingers crossed eFootball can rise like a phoenix from the flames and give players the football game we've always wanted from Konami. Do I think it will happen? Probably not. It's more likely in 5 years' time the franchise will die a very slow death and disappear off into the horizon, and Konami will probably go bust because there's very little else that Konami have really got going for them at the moment. Okay, those were the 10 reasons why I think PES failed. What do you think about those reasons? Do you agree with them? Are there other reasons it ultimately didn't succeed? And what are your hopes for the future with eFootball? Drop your suggestions in the comments. But for now, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. This is Photography Gamer signing off. Thank you.